this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. Delighted to have back Virginia Canter, who heads the ethics operation for Democracy Defenders. Virginia, you and your colleagues are out with a new report, timely in a way perhaps you didn't anticipate, about Elon Musk and his massive conflicts of interest. Welcome, and tell us a little bit, big picture, what you found.
Well, we came at it because I, understood that he had government contracts, but I had no idea of just how intertwined his business interests were with the federal government. So this was, it was just a incredible eye-opening experience. Just in the, since the inauguration, he's gotten, I think, something like over $6 billion worth of federal contracts, mostly through SpaceX. And that's on top of like the $16 billion, more than $16 billion worth of contracts he already had. They've brought in programs at Commerce, or intend to, that would make his Starlink satellite program eligible for a $45 billion contract. And there's also a $500+ billion missile shield program. So he is a government contractor. I mean, that's the bottom line. His business's interests are significantly intertwined. And so the question is, we went through a number of his businesses and we looked at how they could have created conflicts of interest for him while he was in government service. He was a special government employee. He was subject to the primary conflict of interest law, 18 U.S.C. 208. And whether he was an SGE or a regular government employee, all government employees are. And we looked at various business interests and, identified at least 13 where it would merit investigation by the Office of Government Ethics. And I'll just say this, it's not just investigating whether he had possible conflicts of interest, and it's also how did the White House, what procedures did they put in place to prevent him from engaging in conflicts of interest? These are not self-monitoring exercises. There needs to be an ethics agreement in place. And amongst the most, complicated types of conflicts of interest to handle are those of a special government employee. When you mirror that with the richest person in the world, it's staggering. And so we also have to step back and look to see whether we have a systemic issue, whether the guardrails that are in place to address these types of conflicts of interest are adequate.
Now, the statute you outline is a criminal statute. You're not allowed to go into government in any capacity and help yourself. There is a potential in that law for seeking a waiver. Did you find any evidence that any of this conflict were waived? And in fact, didn't Trump say publicly that he's going to monitor himself, in essence?
Right. So there is absolutely no evidence of a waiver. There are waivers on the publicly available. These types of waivers have to be made publicly available for other government employees, including White House employees, including David Sachs, his I think a crypto advisor. So it's really puzzling.
Many people are familiar with Tesla, X, even SpaceX, but what jumped out to me in that report was his AI business. Oh, yeah. And we heard lots of news reports that he was going into government agencies, he was drawing out this information, and he made public declarations that he wanted to use AI. Talk to us a little bit about the actual conflicts and then the potential conflicts that could arise now that he has drawn all that data out of the government. What could he potentially do that would benefit his AI businesses?
Yeah, so his crew, almost from day one, they tried to, drop them into these agencies, and some of them met initial resistance, particularly at the Department of the Treasury. And they went right to the core. They went to three key agencies. They went to the General Services Administration, which is responsible for facilities, but importantly, computer systems, IT systems, contracts. They went to OPM for the, which contains all the personnel information involving every government employee now and in the past. And then they went to the Department of the Treasury, which is the Holy Grail. That's the payment system. And by obtaining access to the data in these systems, it created the potential that they could extract the data and, and merge it with their own, potentially with their own systems, or to create a new system. So that does two things. One, if that's I think ultimately the biggest concern is, one, merging all this data, which is intended to be segregated so that you're protecting privacy interests and proprietary information, including from his own competitors or adversaries. And you keep it segregated so it's only available for the use for which it was intended, and it's only obtainable by persons who are authorized to receive that information. But there's this fear that they are merging the data, and when they merge the data, are they integrating it into their AI systems? And then from that, they can obtain all kinds of information that there's no other source of that information in the world. It's the most sensitive type of information out there. But one thing that I'm particularly concerned with is when you hire a government contractor to do this type of work, they're under the strictest types of restrictions in terms of how they can use that data and how they can access it in the future. And this is very sensitive data, so it would have to be under the tightest types of restrictions. But we don't know whether somebody just gave him unlimited permissions to use that data, and whether or not they actually have, if they use their own software, whether they kept the rights in that software. And it makes us vulnerable in terms of like continuity of government service. If he disappears, or not, not literally, but figuratively, from the federal government, will others be able to access that data?
One of the other businesses that we have heard something about is Starlink. Talk to us a little bit about what he attempted to do in terms of, if you will, marketing Starlink to the government, what he was successful at, and where those relationships stand right now.
Well, I think, one of the biggest concerns, he is trying to, for example, there is a $45 billion program run out of the Commerce Department that was intended to expand broadband access for rural communities. And what one of the key questions of this report is how involved he was in these matters. But the Commerce Department announced that they were going to change the requirements, which would expand the eligibility for contractors who operate satellite systems to become eligible for these services. There's a question about whether that was, necessary, and there are experts who do not think it is necessary, but if they follow through on the change in requirements, it would make Musk's satellite Starlink system eligible to compete for those contracts. The other very troubling thing was he was intersecting, while he was a special government employee, he was also meeting with foreign government officials, and particularly it seemed to promote the Starlink satellite systems. So that there was a meeting at the White House with the Bangladeshi official, there were at Blair House with the Prime Minister of India. He was on these trade missions with the president, where recently to the Middle East, where he was promoting Starlink systems. And also there's a number of other another number of other countries where he was negotiating deals. So it's not just that he was profiting from the US government in terms of being awarded federal contracts, billions and billions and billions of contracts, but also he was using his access to the White House to promote his business so that he was also obtaining, who knows how many billions of overseas dollars.
During the period of time that he was a special government employee, was he awarded new contracts with the federal government? And it seems like it's a very big number attached to that. Do you have an estimate of what that was?
Well, just for SpaceX alone was $6 billion. All right, and his wealth, I think, increased by I think Forbes estimated $140 billion since Inauguration Day.
One of the other areas that there was a lot of public talk about, but I'm curious whether anything came of it, was that he was going to use Starlink to redesign in the transportation arena, our airplane security, our FAA. Did that come to fruition, or is that still an open question?
I think, well, definitely they've installed Starlink satellites. They've installed Starlink satellites at FAA facilities and at the White House. And if he were to have participated in decisions regarding those installations, that would create, the potential for a conflict of interest. Certainly, they were installed. There is confirmation, there's been public reporting, and I think that's been confirmed by the White House and the FAA that there were installations. He wanted to, there are indications that he wanted to expand the installations much broader at the FAA, and I believe that's under consideration. But he had his minions at the FAA, at various agencies, and he still does. So even though he may have left government, we list, there's tens and tens of them throughout the federal government in key positions. So his influence, continues.
What should happen at this point? Should Congress investigate? I know this is peculiar in light of the feud that's going on. Should there be some kind of special counsel that should investigate? What's the next step in exposing, getting visibility, and getting some accountability?
Well, because there, basically you have the potential for conflicts of interest here. We're asking OGE to look at this and examine. We want
the Office of Government Ethics.
The Office of Government Ethics. Thank you. So, because we see the potential for a conflict of interest, but also the question is, what did the White House Ethics Office do to ensure that he wasn't going to be stepping over the lines? And also look at our ethics framework. He was subject to the least amount of ethics restrictions. This is the richest person in the world, and it lays forth the possibility that future billionaires will decide to come into this administration or others as special government employees, billionaires who will basically use their access to the presidency to enrich themselves through their business interests. So do we have the ethical restrictions in place to prevent that from happening? The purpose of a government employee is to serve the public interest. But when somebody walks away with billions of dollars in contracts, you have to really question, in just 130 days, you really have to question, are they working in the public interest, or did they have their own personal agenda? So there's systemic issues that should be looked at, by OGE, by congressional offices. There should also be, 18 U.S.C. 208 is a criminal, civil, it has criminal and civil penalties. Were there potential violations? Does it merit investigation by the Department of Justice? But given this breakup, it also puts him in a, between him and the president, it puts him in a very vulnerable position because this is not an independent Department of Justice. And when you see, the president go on a rampage against his enemies and his, one of his closest advisors had this kind of exposure that they may have done nothing to protect him from. It may merit further investigation by the Department of Justice.
This is eye-popping. We have the link that you will be able to get, and I encourage everyone to take a look at it. It's extremely detailed, about 80 pages, but it is readable. And I think it will drive home really the danger of capture, that billionaires with this kind of access will not only act in their own interests, but potentially take those products of government that really are the public ownership, whether it's data, whether it's personnel, whatever it is, and take that with them into the private sector. That's something that should not be done.
And can I just thank my co-authors,
Absolutely.
Charlie Green and Heather Dewar, who did meticulous reporting and, compiled all of this information and organized it in a way that I think is, sets forth the issues pretty clearly. And of course, the expertise of my Democracy Defenders Fund colleague, Norm Eisen.
And you properly give a shout out that much of this information was reported on. We have news organizations, legacy news organizations, new ones like Wired, who have surfaced this information. What this report is put it all together so that you can see the magnitude of the issue. So thanks very much, Ginny. We really appreciate it. We appreciate the work you're doing, and we'll talk to you soon.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Jen.